What should you do? Should you open a shop on Etsy? Or should you open your own website on Shopify? Well, this decision can actually be a little bit confusing and a little bit difficult, especially if you're new. So today I'm going to give you the pros and cons of each, and then after that we'll take a little quiz and I will give you recommendations based on what your answers are. Easy peasy. Okay, first we're gonna jump right in to some pros and cons of opening an Etsy shop. Some of the pros of creating an Etsy shop are, it's super easy to set up. You can do it in just a matter of minutes. There's no need for ads. Etsy is a marketplace, so there is a built-in audience. By just creating an Etsy shop, you will get some views from current customers of Etsy's. As long as you concentrate on your SEO and your pictures, you should be good and you shouldn't need to spend any extra money on ads. It is very cheap to start an Etsy shop, and as a matter of fact, it's pretty much free until you make a sale, other than the 20 cents that it costs to list an item. And then that item is good for 4 months, or when the item is purchased, it will re-up at 20 cents, but then you've made the sale. It is much easier and cheaper for testing products versus having to pay for ads in order to test products. Now for some of the cons of having an Etsy shop. The first and probably biggest one is that Etsy owns your shop. You do not own it. As if you had a website, you pay for your domain, you own it. Because Etsy owns your Etsy shop, they can close you at any time that they want to. They dictate where you show in the search results, and they have the final say in your business, essentially. Another con of having an Etsy shop is you're dependent on their algorithm. You need to play their game. You need to do what they want you to do as far as your SEO is concerned, as far as your titles, your descriptions, even things as far as offering free shipping. There's a lot of different things that go into play when it comes to where you show in the Etsy search results. So you're playing their game essentially. You're only going to have so much control over moving yourself as far as up or down in the Etsy searches. Obviously, another con to Etsy is that you're limited in the products you can sell on Etsy. So you can really only sell vintage, supplies, or handmade. This in turn can limit your growth because you have to stay in the handmade category. So if you're making products, you start off making products, and then let's say you want to start having some stuff manufactured. If you designed it, you can use a production partner on a smaller scale, but if you wanted to start maybe adding in some other things that are not your products, you won't be able to do that. So it's gonna most likely hinder your growth a little bit depending on the direction that you're looking to go. Another con is that it's hard to grow or create a brand on Etsy. And many times you've probably seen this, and maybe you've even done it yourself. And maybe someone's like, oh, that's a really cute bracelet. Where did you get it? Most likely you're going to say on Etsy. You're not going to say the individual shop name on Etsy, and chances are you don't even remember the name of the shop on Etsy. Etsy is the marketplace, and that's generally where people are going to say they got something. So it's really kind of difficult to create a brand and stand out. And it's also difficult because your products are always being shown against other brands. Sure, when you're on your actual shop, you can have a banner up top, and you can have, maybe a general theme for your photos that people see them and know they're from you. But even on your shop, when you scroll to the bottom, you're going to see competitors' products. So it makes it very difficult to have a brand and to stand out. The next con is that it's not customizable. You only have a banner and your pictures, as I said, to really make yourself stand out. And because of that lack of customization, it makes it difficult to really kind of make things the way you envision them in your head. And not only that, but you're limited on how you can place things. For example, you can only have a product under one category. So what if you have a product that technically fits under 2 or 3 categories? You got to pick the best one and kind of go with it. So there's a lot of different ways that you're really limited in what you can do. You can't sell your own gift cards. You can't have a rewards program on there. There's just a lot of stuff that you can't do on your Etsy shop that you'd be able to do on your own website as far as customization is concerned. The next con for Etsy is there's a lot of competition, especially in particular niches on there. So what's a lot of competition is going to make it harder for you to stand out. Some people say that Etsy is saturated right now. I don't really know if that would ever really be true. There's a lot of sellers, but if you are a good and consistent seller on Etsy and you stick through it, there are a lot of shops on there. They start a shop, think that they're going to make a lot of money really quickly, and when they don't, they just give up on it. So whenever we see like a wave up of lots of shops, it's just a matter of time before it starts going back down for those that are not really serious and not really willing to put in the work that it takes to be on Etsy. Just because there's a lot of saturation, I'm not going to say overly saturated, doesn't mean that you're not going to make sales. You just might have to put in a little more work than you would otherwise. But that is still a con that you have so much competition so close to you where people can easily jump from one store to another. Which brings me into my next con, is it's a marketplace, where that can be on the pro side, and we did have it on the pro side. It's also a con. Because it's a marketplace, customers are always just a click away from another shop. Whereas if you're on your own website, they would actually have to get off of your website and go to Google or go to some other website in order to see anyone else's products. With Etsy, it's right there next to you, right on the bottom of your shop and everywhere you can go, which means if you put in a lot of effort to bring people to your shop, it's not always going to pay off. And if this matters to you, it doesn't particularly to me, but to some people it does. Another con to Etsy is that you're limited in payment providers that you can accept. So that's just the thought there. If you want to take different forms of payments that are not accepted by Etsy, that might be an issue. And the last con for Etsy is that because you don't own your Etsy shop, Etsy does, you cannot sell it. So if you have hopes that one day you might want to grow to the point where you sell your business, or if you wanted that extra security, so if anything in your life happened and you had to give it up, and worst case you can just sell it, it's not going to happen with Etsy. So you just want to keep that in mind as well. You don't actually own your shop. Now let's jump into the Shopify pros and cons, but just keep in mind, when I'm saying Shopify, it really could mean any other website on any other hosting platform that you want to use. I'm just using Shopify as the example, and it's going to represent just your own website. So the first pro of having your own website would be that you own it. You don't have to worry about anybody shutting you down or following anyone else's rules, as long as you're staying within legal range, of course. Pro number 2 is there's no algorithm to please. You do probably want to worry about Google SEO, but if you're doing a really good job at advertising, or you have a really big social media following of people that are coming to purchase from your shop, it's not the end all be all. So this just gives you a little bit more freedom with how you want to write your titles and your descriptions, and maybe you don't want to feel like you need to keep yourself in a certain specific format that all these algorithms like to see. The next pro of using Shopify or having your own website is that you can create your website any way you want to. There's complete flexibility there. You can make it as simple or as complex or as artistic as you want. Complete flexibility, and you're not stuck in any kind of particular format. There are tons of third-party apps out there, so you can add all kinds of different features. You can accept gift cards, and you can have a rewards program, and you can have a blog on your website. Like, there's just so much you can do. It's really limitless, where obviously on Etsy, you're really, really limited to just their format. Another pro of having your own website is that you're not having to worry about any other platform's terms and conditions. When it comes to Etsy, they have a lot of rules that they want you to follow, and that they really pay attention to whether or not you stick by them for certain things. These are all things that you don't need to worry about with your own website. You set your terms and conditions. You say whether or not you offer free shipping and how much that free shipping is for. Another pro to having your own website is there's no competition to click on. If somebody gets to your website, no matter how you brought them there, they cannot just click on another competitor. They would have to leave your website and go to a totally different website in order to do that. The next pro to having your own website is it's much more professional looking. You will likely be taken more seriously if you have a website for people to purchase on versus an Etsy shop. Not to say Etsy is unprofessional, but having your own website and your own branding can definitely give you that next level of professionalism and maybe make people trust you a little bit more. At least know that you're more serious about your business. The next pro to having your own website is that you can scale and grow much easier and cheaper. Okay, because Etsy's transaction fees are actually quite high. So once you get past the threshold of the monthly fees of a Shopify store, your percentages per sale are going to be much lower on Shopify because you're only paying the credit card fee, whereas on Etsy you're paying the credit card fee and then a transaction fee and then a processing fee, and so they're taking a much bigger cut. So the more that you sell, the more you're losing to Etsy. And you can save a significant amount of money on Shopify. And not to mention the scaling. When it comes to scaling, you can add more products and whatever products you want to on Shopify, different types of products. And you can also expand into actual different websites all connected to one. You can add a blog, you can add your Instagram, and there's tons of ways to grow and scale your business having your own website that you're limited on for Etsy. The next pro of having your own website is that, and I'm pretty sure I mentioned this before, but you can offer gift cards and you can also have rewards programs, and these can both help you grow and scale your business and to get repeat customers. And the last pro of having a Shopify website would be that you own it. Okay, so you can sell that business whenever you want to. Unlike Etsy, as we discussed before, you don't own it, so you can't sell it. And when you're looking into becoming an entrepreneur, if that's your goal, eventually, you probably do want to sell it, or if just at least have the option to. And so that's a pretty big pro as far as I'm concerned. Now let's get into some of the cons of Shopify. So a con of Shopify is that it is going to be most likely more expensive initially to set up than say setting up an Etsy shop. So I had mentioned before that Etsy only charges you a 20-cent transaction fee per listing that you put up. They don't charge you anything for having your shop. Where Shopify charges you a monthly fee for having your shop, and they also charge you they don't charge you, but a lot of times when you're customizing your store, your website, you're going to end up with some third-party apps on there, and you usually have to pay monthly fees for those, and trust me, they can add up pretty quickly. So before you know it, it could be costing you $100 a month for your website once you've had it all set up. Not to mention, if you don't want to go with one of the free templates, and you want to either pay for one of the paid versions or hire somebody to create your website and to design it for you, then that's going to be even more expensive. That'll be much more expensive for upfront costs compared to Etsy. The next con to having a Shopify store is that you have to bring all of your traffic. It is not a marketplace. You cannot just put your website up and hope people are going to find it. It will not work like that. So you either need to run paid ads, or you need to have social media and do content marketing, or you need to have some other way to bring customers to your website. That could be costly and it could take a lot of time. The next con to having your own website on Shopify is that storefronts can be expensive and complicated to set up initially. Especially if you need to figure out how to do any coding, that can definitely get very confusing and you can mess up your store pretty quickly if you don't know what you're doing. And if you need to hire a professional, that can get very expensive as well. If you have a more simple store, just a product and few variations to them, then you should be okay. But once you start adding in digital products or lots of variations to your products, then it could get a little more complicated. If you want to add in the ability to accept gift cards and the rewards programs, and you want to have a pop-up that asks people to sign up for your email. There's so many different things that you might want to do with your website that all have to be set up by you to be able to figure it out. So, in this case, it's a bit easier, well, a lot easier to just set up an Etsy shop. So, those are the pros and cons of each, and I know you're probably thinking right about now that it seems pretty clear cut and dry. Look how long the list of pros is for Shopify versus the list of cons for Etsy. But you have to keep in mind that not all of these points are created equal. Some of them are way more important than the others. So I've made this a little bit easier, and I have a quiz, and I am going to go through and ask you questions that you're going to answer yes or no to. So grab a piece of paper and a pen and get ready to start writing your answers down. Question number 1, are you a beginner? Do you know how to run ads? Do you know how to deal with SEO? Do you know how to create a website? These are all questions you want to ask yourself. If you are a beginner, Etsy may be the way for you to go because it is a lot easier to set up your shop and you're not having to worry about figuring out how to bring your traffic in. Remember, with Shopify, you have to bring all of your traffic yourself. Question number 2 is, do you have an audience? Do you have a social media platform that you've already created and worked on and grown to a certain amount of subscribers or followers? If you do, you already have that warmed, built-in audience to help you out. If not, then you're starting from scratch and you don't have anybody to sell to. And in this case, if your answer is yes and you already have an audience, you might be okay just to go ahead and jump into your website. But if you don't have an audience, then you are most likely just going to want to start with Etsy. Question number 3 is, are you or do you plan to be selling handmade items or vintage items or supplies? So, do you sell the things that you can actually sell on Etsy? But the more important question is, what do you plan to sell in the future? If you just want to make handmade products and that's just where you want to be and you don't want to expand and grow, then you're fine with Etsy. But if you want to expand into having items produced and manufactured for you or sell other manufactured products that you buy wholesale, then Etsy is not going to be your best bet, or at least you would start with Etsy and with the intention of growing and moving to Shopify. Question number 4 is, do you want to grow a brand? Do you even want to? Some people don't want to. Some people just want a side hustle, or maybe they just want a little small business that they can run on the side because they don't really need the income, or maybe they just want a freer lifestyle and they don't want to have to worry about the stress of running a big company, or whatever the case may be, whatever your reasoning may be. Not everybody necessarily wants to grow a brand. So it's important to decide, is that something you want to do? Because as we discussed before, it's more difficult to get your brand to stand out and actually create a brand on Etsy than it is on Shopify. Question number 5 is, do you have limited time? As I said, Etsy is going to be really easy to set up, Okay, so you don't need as much time to get things going. You're not going to need to figure out how to do all the ads. You're not going to be worried as necessarily about having to grow and spend time growing your social media platform because you have to bring customers in. Because it's a marketplace, those customers are already there, or at least some of them are. So if you have limited time, if your answer is yes, then Etsy might be your better bet. If you have more time, then maybe you want to consider going ahead on the website and growing, starting to actually create and grow a brand and put your time and effort into that website and making it unique and making it stand out and customizing it as much as you want to. But that stuff takes time. So that's going to have an effect on the decision on what your best choice is. Okay, so now it's time to look at your answers for these 5 questions that we just went through, and I'm going to give you some recommendations based on what you answered. Okay, so if these were your answers, then my recommendation would be to just go ahead and open your own website on Shopify. And the biggest reason behind this recommendation is that you have an audience and you want to create a brand, so this is your best shot. It may not be worth putting time and effort into growing an Etsy shop. So you may just want to start with the website. Plus, if you're not making handmade stuff, then you kind of have to start with Shopify. So if these were your answers, then my recommendation for you is to just go ahead and start with Etsy, at least at first. And so the deciding factors on this recommendation, the important parts, are that you have no audience and you have limited time, which makes Etsy kind of perfect for you because it's easy to set up and it has its own built-in audience. This is not to say that you can't open a Shopify store later, but for your circumstances, I would definitely recommend starting with Etsy first and then worrying about Shopify later. And lastly, if you have any other combination of answers and you sell products that can be sold on Etsy, then my recommendation is to do either, but I really recommend doing both. And that pretty much brings me into my final recommendation to pretty much everybody is that you should have both. It's always nice and easy to start on Etsy, but you never want to just have Etsy. Maybe at the very, very beginning, maybe you still have a day job that you have, but if you ever plan to quit your day job and take your business all the way, you really need to have your own website. Okay, Etsy can shut you down at any time, and you really, really do not want to be putting everything on that. When you have the Etsy shop, you can really, when you have both really, you can really take advantage of that marketplace and bring customers in. And then you can offer email signups, like newsletter signups on Etsy for a discount on your Etsy shop, and those emails could be for your business. When you send those emails, they're always going to have your website links. They're not going to have the Etsy links. So as soon as you get that customer the first time, you can now then try to get them over to your website. You can also send them coupons, and I send out like thank you cards that have coupons that are good on my website to get them over there with a QR code. But really you can start building your email list and building your customer list off of Etsy's market, and then try to move them over to purchasing from your website. It may take a couple times, they may just feel more comfortable purchasing on Etsy, whether it's convenient because they're purchasing from multiple stores at once, or they're able to just go and find products they've purchased from you previously and it's easier to just go do that. Either way, it may take a couple tries to get them over to your website, but keep trying because eventually you'll be able to get them over there. And once you've converted them over to your website, you then have your email list that you own, and you now have your customers over there where you don't have to worry about Etsy shutting you down. So this is always my recommendation. Even if your shop is doing quite well, I don't think it necessarily hurts to have a shop on Etsy also. You're still reaching a different audience that you might not be reaching otherwise. And so you can really take advantages of both sets of pros from each shop. I hope I was able to help you decide, or at least make things a little clearer for you on what you might want to do. So if you made a decision today after watching this video, let us know in the comments which one you're going to be doing. Also, if you enjoyed the video and you got some help from it, if you wouldn't mind giving it a thumbs up, I'd really appreciate it. And make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any more videos. Hit it right now. Do it. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one.